Waterford. I know you were born here, so you've been here the whole time?
Yes.
Huh?
Yeah, 86.
86 years?
Yeah.
Now, you were born on the Daniels farm?
Yes,
It's
I
known as
was.
the Daniels farm? Is that Daniels Farm Road?
Yes.
Has that always been Daniels Farm Road?
No. They didn't have names until it was just a highway.
Oh, okay.
Highway 4, I believe.
Highway 4 or something
Yeah,
like
then- Yeah.
that. And your school was
Hastings School
Hastings.
on Simpson Brook
on
Road.
Simpson Brook Road.
Yeah.
And did you have brothers and sisters?
I had one brother and 2 sisters. My brother's was Glenn. My oldest sister was Lucille, and then Marjorie. Marjorie just died a couple of years ago. She went to Connecticut, and she moved back to Waterford.
And did you go to high school at the academy?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Yep. All 4 years.
All 4 years.
Yeah. At that point, they didn't have a bus, and we couldn't drive every day. My folks couldn't take me, so I had to live in town,
Oh, you
in
did?
St. Johnsbury.
Oh.
And
Did you live with a family?
the first year I lived with, first 2 years I lived with my sister outside on the Danville Road. And then the last 2 years I lived with Myrtie Cushman, she did live by the Pike plant. There was a house. And they moved to St. Jay, and her husband worked for Paulson's. So they took me in, and they were very, very good. I worked Molten Snack Shop, so I didn't have any meals with them. I didn't eat any at school during high school.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I was supposed to get just 2 meals from Molten's. After I'd been there for a little, because I worked for them, and after I'd been there for not even a week, Mr. Molten says, "You can have your 3rd meal here too if you want." They were awful good to me. There was man and his wife, Ma and Pa Molten.
What did you do after high school?
Got married.
You got married?
Yeah, I graduated in June and was married in September.
To whom?
Oh, Russell Davis, who lived in Waterford.
And he was a schoolmate?
Well, he was 8 years older than I, so when I was in the 1st grade, he was in the 8th grade, and used to get me in trouble. I would sit in the front, and he'd sit in the back across the room, and I'd look around at him, and he'd wink. Well, I winked with both eyes, and to him that was hilarious. But my 1st grade teacher didn't know little kids, and I put in a terrible year that year. She had spent most of my time head on my desk, or stay in recesses until the older kids decided that I wasn't going to stay in recesses all the time. They said, if she stays in, we stay in, and we won't be very nice either.
Wow.
And so she began, and I think my mother must have had something to do about it too, because my sister was in the 7th grade.
So how many kids were in that schoolroom?
Oh my goodness. Probably 8. I had another little girl that was with me, and Mom said I did a lot better until she moved the middle of the year. She went to, her folks moved, and so she went with them, and I just seemed to lose it. But it was hard for me to learn. I think I had a little dyslexia, yeah.
When you were first married, where did you live? Did you live on
We
a farm?
had an apartment for a short time. Then my father died we were married in September. My father died in February, and we moved up to the farm for my husband to work with my brother. And then in 52, we bought a house down near Passumpsic, but it was still in Waterford on Route 5. And Russ was, at that point, working at the corner garage for Pat's department. The corner garage where off in Hastings Hill and Railroad Street.
Do you have children?
Do I?
Yeah,
Yes, I had 7.
you had 7?
I've got 5 living.
Yeah. Do they live around here?
Just 2 of them.
2 of them.
Yeah, my 2 oldest. The other 3 went out west.
Oh,
The oldest one's, I call him Ted, it's Thomas. His sister's Kathy. And I waited 5 years and had Stephen. Another 5 years and had Glenn. I did have miscarriage in between. Had Glenn, and then Susan and Paul, twins. We lost the boy. And Amy.
did you and your husband participate in like town government or
Russell was selectman for 12 years.
12 years?
Yeah. And I helped with the school and the PTA.
What was it like for him to be in politics?
It was okay until the state stepped in. They could do what needed to be done. And Russ finally, he said after the last few years, he said, I can't do any more.
Did you get a lot of phone calls like at night?
No, he didn't.
Really?
No, not too bad. More from the garage than he did.
Oh,
Some of the loggers would break down, they'd call and needed parts.
so he was a mechanic for.
He
Most
could
of
be,
his life?
but he was took care of the parts department for the mechanics. He was there, I don't know, he went through about 30 bosses. Because that garage changed hands a lot.
And where
He
was
went in 46, and I think it was 85 that when Wayne Ford took over. Gave him 2-hour notice and said, that's it. Oh, it was, and he was 55. Oh, boy. That was hard, and he had all these kids. Because we had 3 foster children. His brother had died, and the mother died earlier, so we took the 3 kids, and it was quite a blow. He didn't even know what was going to happen.
So did you have all 7 of the others at the same time, or I mean when?
I had
took
3
the
others.
foster-
Well,
took the
Ted was
foster
in the
kids?
service. He'd gone overseas. And Kathy was married, but then she moved back home with her little one.
Wow. Yeah,
But
that's
they
full.
kind of had a little apartment by their own. So
Whoa.
it was hectic. We had our own cow, we had our own pigs, we had our own beef. Because when the cow would have a steer, we'd butcher it. You get attached to those.
Yeah.
That's the last time that I was pregnant with the twins. And I told Russell I'd get attached to the steer. And I said, you tell when he comes after him that I can't help load him, because I've always helped load the others. So I watched in the window, and pretty soon I see him come into the door. The man said, Mrs. Davis, will you come out and help us load? So I went out, and I said, come on, Ferdinand. And I walked into the truck, or the trailer, and he followed me right in. And so then when the first meal we had of Hamburg, I said to Russ, I said, now we won't say anything about this being Ferdinand. So because of the kids. He said, okay. So we started to eat. Pretty soon when the kids piped up, is this Ferdinand? They didn't care, but I did. Oh dear.
After Russell lost his job, how did you guys manage?
Well, Warren Mr. Warren had a garage on Warren's Flat. I think it's where Webb is now, Webb. And so he said, he called Russ right up. He says, I need a man. He says, and I know you're good. He says, will you come and help? And so Russ did. And, but Tap and Die was, Northeast Tool was a spin-off from Tap and Die, and they were looking for help, so Russ decided he'd go there where he could have more, get a little pension and stuff. And so he did. He gave his notice, and he said, he says, I don't want to lose you. I asked Mr. Warren one time, I said, would Russell do something that would make Wayne can him? And he said no. He says Russell would not do a thing. He'd just do what he was supposed to do, but it was money. He didn't want to pay him what he was getting, and he had a car to drive. I had a demo, and he didn't. So he called me at 3. He had said at noon, don't wait supper, you feed the kids, and because I'm going to take inventory. About 3 o'clock, phone rang. It was Russ, and he said, pick me up at 5. I says, what? Because he had a truck to pick up. And yeah, he said, you pick me up at 5. And I said, you haven't been canned, have you? Joking. He said, yes. I still didn't believe it until I picked him up, and he come out with his toolbox that he had, his personal things. Look on his face was, yeah. But we got through it.
What type of cows did they have on the farm?
Jersey.
Jerseys?
They had my brother was just getting them bred so that it would be full-blooded Jerseys when he died. And we were supposed to put in a bulk tank because they had, at that point, we just go in cans and putting them in the cooler. But the state was going to make them put in bulk tanks. And they were debating because the road went between the two barns. And at that point, and they didn't know where they'd put it. And then they decided where. And then he died. He dropped dead. He dropped with a heart attack. They got him into the house, but he didn't live. So he was only 43. Yeah. Then they sold everything. Russ and I thought we might want to take it over, but my uncle and my mother said, no, we're going to sell. So they had an auction.
And what year was that? Do you remember?
59. Because Stephen was 2. He was born 57. Yeah.
And the cows went?
Yeah, they auctioned them, yeah. Local farmers bought some. I know Lock Matthew bought 2 or 3. Or maybe more, I don't know. I didn't go to the auction. Then their equipment too was sold. My mother called my sister called. And Russ answered the phone about 6:30 in the morning, and he come up to the bedroom. He says, Glenn died. And I said, you mean Carl? Because my uncle had heart trouble. No, Glenn. I said, well, Glenn who? I couldn't believe that I'd seen him Sunday, and he was perfectly all right, and this was probably about Wednesday. Then my mother found a man that she had known from Concord when she was a girl. And that was strange, because one day I heard this man, I was up, my mother always went down to Laconia to see her sister once a year. So she went down, and so I went up and kept the house for Uncle Carl. I heard this man coming through the old entryway, and he rapped, and I didn't know him. He says, is your mother home? I says, no. And he said, well, I saw the little toy, that was Stephen, outside playing, he said, and I thought maybe she was babysitting. And I said, no. I said, he told me who he was, mail carrier. And he had gone down Duck Pond Road and scooted up to see her. And so I told him, I said, well, she'll be home such and such time, so give her a call. So he did. By golly, they got married after a fashion. And she had a good life with him. She didn't have to work as hard, and she never traveled with my folks. If Dad went anywhere, Uncle Carl went. They were just like, it was something. But Mom put up with it, you know. And Dad was good to her. But if Uncle Carl wanted a firehouse for the fire pump, we had built a pond, and he wanted, and Mom said, I'm getting my kitchen remodeled before. That's the only time I think she stuck up the guns. And Dad said, okay, and they did both. Yeah.
You must have had quite a few acres of farmland.
I think there was 500 in all,
acres.
yeah.
Because did anybody do any logging?
I don't know, they must have logged off from the first part of the property, because I've got pictures of the logging, and that was about the time they decided to put a sawmill in, and it was during the Depression, and it worked good because people around would bring their logs, and Uncle Carl, he's very, very talented with his machinery, didn't like cattle, so he wouldn't farm that way, but he took care of the machinery. And the horses, when they had horses, he loved horses.
Did they use the sawmill for anything else?
Make cider.
Oh, all right.
And of course, some of it, my mom would say, I'm having my vinegar. If you don't have your cider. Yeah.
So did you have an apple orchard?
They just got wild apples all over where there was trees. Yeah. Some years were good and some weren't.
Did they do any maple sugaring?
Oh, that kept them going during the Depression. Yeah. They had a big sugar orchard. And Uncle Carl there again, he would drive the horses, and brother Glenn would gather, and my father would boil. And in the spring of the year, when it was so muddy, Simpson Brook Road got, terrible. You couldn't go over it with a car. And it would flood over, the river, the brook would flood over. So we'd have to walk down from Simpson's, where Dr. Turek lives, down to the school, which was about a mile. They had their own gasoline pump. Yeah.
Whoa.
That's another thing. My uncle was very, very good at, anything come out, he had it. And during the Depression, it worked good because their farm machinery, there was machinery for farming, so they were not Depression so much as the war. Gasoline was rationed, but we always had plenty. We could use it we only went down once a week. Got groceries.
Big trucks come and bring the gasoline to your tank?
Yeah, it was a big tank. It was up in the field. I don't know where it is now, I guess. But back in the old days, they didn't think about leaks and stuff.
How did you get to town? What route?
Went down Daniels Farm Road to the radio station down Concord Avenue. And if it was muddy, I remember one time we had to leave the car, but we couldn't make it all the way home. So we carried the groceries.
Did they ever quarry slate from?
Oh, that's another thing. They quarried slate. Oh. Yeah. So we never was during the Depression like some people, because we had the slate and the sugaring. I remember when maple syrup went from $2 a gallon to $3, and my father was ecstatic. Oh, he was so happy. Oh, that was really... And
So where was your sugar house?
it's about where Ken Keach's house is now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I guess Ken was using the maple. Uncle Carl told him he could make maple syrup, and so he left the arch, the sugaring off arch, and Dad had always worried for fear it would catch fire, and he'd go out and check it at night after. But boy, one night it burned. So.
What happened to the horses on the farm? Did they die on the farm, or they just sold?
I think they just sold them. I don't remember only one that had to be put down on the farm. And that was my uncle. I called him my Uncle Dan. He was an older man. He was my father's cousin, I believe. And he used to go to work. He worked down the Fairbanks' foundry. And he'd drive, in the summer, he'd drive to work and back.
Oh, on the horse and buggy?
Yeah, the horse and buggy. In the winter, I don't know if he ever had a license. I don't think he did.
At the barn to table, you made a punch, didn't you?
Yes.
So can you tell us the history of that punch? And
I don't know where my mother got the recipe, but she got it for us girls' weddings.
Oh.
My sister was married in August, and I was married in September, because there again I had to keep up with the other two girls. No, but Russ was older, so he 8 years older, so we decided we better get married. So I don't know where she got the recipe. Mom was busy that fall.
because everybody got married.
Everybody was getting married.
At the farm? You got married?
Madge was married in the house, in the living room, and I was married out under the trees, which some of them are gone now, most of them are. But I had an arch, and I was married September 25th.
Pretty time of year.
It was, but you know, it was hard. The woman that, very artistic she was, Mrs. Jenny Hastings, and to get fall leaves at that time, didn't think she was going to find enough. It was a beautiful day.
So the farm is different now in that the road, Slate Ledge Road.
Yes.
And you also had a barn and a shed.
Yes,
That burned.
that connected to the house. There again, if the whole place would have gone, if it hadn't been for the fire hoses. And we were gone. Russ and I had gone over to Maine because I had to get away because there were so many kids. So every so often we'd go to Maine. Well, Judge Wesley said it. She says, you go. And so went over, and Sunday morning before we came home, phone rang, and it was Kathy saying the barn had burned.
Whoa.
And if Stephen, he might have been in high school, but he would go out every week, and Saturday he'd go out with his father and start the engine. The old fire, it was an old gasoline engine. Now you thought, why are they starting that every week? Made an awful racket. So, but it's a darn good thing he knew how to do it, because he started it, he got the hoses going. And when Hubert Simons, the fire chief from St. Jay, come around the corner, he said, oh my God, that whole place is going. But when he got around, he saw the water hoses. He kept it under control until.
Perfect. Boy.
So those hoses were your hoses, not the fire department?
Yeah, we had the fire department, I think was going to get a new engine, so we bought that from them, and the hoses I think we got from them. So we had everything.
You had your pond.
Yeah, that's when they put those 3 ponds in, and was one of them, the back one by the house, was for that protection. And there again, my uncle
Carl,
Yeah,
huh?
he thought of these things, you know. He didn't work hard, but he kept things going. So, yeah, they made butter and sold it. Mom, one year, well, more than 1 year, they had lumbered over on the Hovey place, we called it. That's over back, facing hers. And Mom would go over, she and Mrs. Hooley, who lived neighbor, they'd pick raspberries, and she'd take them down. That's how we kids got our shoes. She'd take them down and sell them on, I don't know, probably to the grocer, I'm not sure. But they sold potatoes to a lot of people in town, bushel at a time.
But the raspberries went into shoes.
Yep, and we had plenty to eat, too. In the winter, we'd move downstairs.
All of you together.
And that would, the heat from the old wood furnace would keep us warm. It would be cold sometimes, but when Dad got up in the morning, he'd stoke it up. Yeah, all we had was a register in my mom's and father's room. But then my uncle and Glenn's was in the L shape, and they had radiators, old steam radiators.
Oh, heated from a furnace?
Yep,
Uh-huh.
yep.
Carl put together
Probably.
to keep himself warm.
To keep himself, the rest of the house didn't get them right.
Yeah, they put one in Glenn's room, and then there was one in Uncle Carl's. He's kind of slept in the hallway, but it was big enough for room. That's what he wanted. And we had one in the dining room, living room, and bedroom. Kitchen. That's when Mom would bring her clothes in. They'd freeze on the line when she washed on Mondays, and she put newspapers. Back then, the print couldn't have been like it is now, because she'd lay the clothes over newspapers on the register or radiator, and then put her clothes over that. Yeah.
Huh. So you outside would dry them out mostly.
Yeah, she had the porch. We had a big porch, and she'd hang them on that and bring them in. Probably, I don't know if she'd bring them that same day or not. But then she'd put quite a few on bars, too, clothes bars. Yeah. Didn't have the conveniences we do now.
No. And then you gardened, vegetable garden.
Yeah, we had our vegetable garden. Mom took care of that, she and us kids. They got it in for her, and then we had to take care of it.
And that's where the potatoes came from that you sold.
No, well, they had a field.
Oh, they had
A field for potatoes.
Oh.
Yep. In the garden, we would have radishes and lettuce, carrots, the small.
Right. Did you have any other things you grew in the fields of? Besides
Corn.
potatoes? Corn.
But mostly that was field corn for the cattle. And we used to put it into the silo, because the silo the top of it's gone in now. And I heard they're going to tear down the barn. So, yeah. Oh, I meant to bring that picture so you would see it. A photographer came one time, and I went out to get the mail, and I see this guy down the road. And so I went back in, and he was taking pictures in the fall of the year. And the barn and then the trees behind it. And after we moved, the people that lived there, one of their daughters told my daughter, there's a picture of your old farm. It was somebody over in Maine. I got his name, and I had 3 pictures made of it. Yeah, it was.
It'd be very nice to have. We never could get a copy of it.
Yes, we should do that.
Yeah.
I didn't think it's.
It's not too late.
No.
So Vivian, is there anything else you want to talk about or tell us about?
Well, at school we'd go out recess and play in the winter, field and, what do they call it? Geese and, fox and geese.
Yeah.
And
Now, how do you play fox and geese?
they have a round, you make a round circle. Did they had like spokes, did they? Something like that. And in the middle was the fox, right?
I can't remember the
I think
actual
so.
game.
I think so. And I don't know just how it did work, but I remember that much. We used to skip.
Skip rope?
Yeah, skip rope, and then that hopscotch. Yeah. And then fall and spring, which I only fell in once, but they used to jump the stones in the brook. I mean, we could go off. I'll teach us. She didn't care. And we'd go in the brook. I guess we had to tell her probably. And the big kids would step stones. Well, I was a little bit small. But I only fell in once.
It's the Simpsons Brook.
Yeah. And it was a brook then. It wasn't like it is now. It was a good big brook. Yeah.
So you had to go back to school with wet clothes?
Oh, yeah. I didn't have any other way. And we used to, like Warren said, we used to bring our water up from the older 7th and 8th graders would bring the water up from Russell's folks who lived down below beside the school. He was a farmer. And that I think I've got some pictures of the barn of that. The people that live there now, they've been there for a number of years, but Kathy met him swimming at the academy, and he wants me to go down and show him what the house used to be. But I'm sure it's changed terribly. And the barn's gone. But
Like so many.
yes, yeah.
Did
Yeah.
you ever have Winnie roast out in the field somewhere?
Yeah, we did once a year, especially when hot dogs and corn roast. That was a big thing at the end of the year. We had a big bonfire out in the pasture, and yeah, that was fun.
And when you say the end of the year, do you mean what, around harvest time? Or
Yeah, in the fall.
in the fall?
Yeah, after the corn
And
ripened.
who would come?
Oh, we had, of course, my sister and her husband and his brother, his mother and father. They were quite close to us. And
So it's family party.
yeah, now Hazel Simpson, we used to have sugaring off too. And Hazel remembers coming to sugaring off. I don't. I know we sugared off, but I didn't. And she said, oh, she'd love that. Something went through my mind.
Any other events that you can think of like that? How did you celebrate Christmas or Thanksgiving or?
Yeah, Thanksgiving we'd have the family and Mr. and Mrs. Farrakhan, my brother-in-law's folks. And I don't think we had any other.
Celebration.
So on Christmas we were by ourselves mostly, and we'll see Uncle Con would come up with their children after they'd had their stockings. And I do remember going to South Reigate when I was a kid. My aunt died when I was 9. But I remember going down a long trip to South Reigate down Route 5 and then had to go outside of South Reigate to where they lived on a farm. one year, Mom might have taken the cake with us. I don't know, but it was my birthday. And it probably was around Thanksgiving. And I remember Aunt Bertha went into her pantry and she came out carrying the cake. I remember that.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember going down a lot, and her kids were a lot older than me, but we got, later years, we've gotten together. They're both dead now, but that was a long haul with that old car. Oh, I wish I could think of some other things. Well, I guess I was going to say, my brother-in-law's niece lived with his folks because her mother died young. So she was brought up by her grandmother, and she'd come up to visit because she was about my age. She'd come up and visit. First thing she wanted to do was go in the barn. She loved cattle. She loved the barn, and I couldn't care less. But I'd go in with her, and when I went down to her house, they lived on Main Street, and it was elite street then. So I enjoyed that. But then and I knew she'd marry a farmer, and sure enough, she did. Yep.
She should have her cows.
They had a Goodrich's farm up there.
Sally?
Yeah, Sally.
Sally, I knew her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
She says, I never knew that I was going to be, and you. I said, well, I did. Yeah, registered jerseys.
Oh, yeah, jerseys.
Yeah, the son's taking it over now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she and Walt retired.
Oh, they're retired?
Yeah,
I haven't seen her for a few years.
she would like to go in the barn some, but her son's wife says no.
Well, she's a pilot. Taught
She
us-
did.
She learned how to fly.
Yeah, she doesn't anymore.
Daughter.
Yeah,
Sally.
Sally. It's just, it was so much fun to have her because she was my age and liked to do what I like to do. Go up Joe's Pond. They had a camp on Joe's Pond. I'd go up there. That was fun.
Must have taken you a while to get there.
I usually rode. Her grandfather was president of the Citizens Bank at Union Bank now. So I'd get down to the bank, and then he'd take me up. And then in the morning, after I'd been there, my sister had a camp up there too. It was their camp, but they would let them use it. And so then I'd ride back the next morning, or whatever morning that I'd stay up probably a week. Yeah. Because back then the cars were getting more sophisticated.
You brought some pictures, and I wondered if you could just go through and name some of the people in them in front.
Okay.
Is it in front of the school?
This is Hastings School,
Okay.
and this
what
is a
year would
picture
that
of
be?
my oldest sister. And they were having a play, I believe, because one of the boys is dressed in a dress. And this little guy, he had a tire that you roll. And I can't remember his first name, but now his last name's gone from me.
Did you say Ward?
Ward, yeah. And this is Bertha Ellen Hastings. She married Robinson. That's Madeline Ward, I believe. This is my sister,
Which one?
the one,
I mean, which sister?
Lucille. Yeah, Lucille. And Danny Rich. I don't know who this one is, but this is my other sister, Madge. She was just a little thing. This picture here was taken when I was in school. This is Howard Eastman, Janice Simpson, I think her name was, no relation, Mickey McClellan, Russell's half-brother, Dick Glander, Hazel Simpson, Hilda, I can't think, she married Cushman, and myself in back, hiding, and Mrs. Sullivan. Oh, she was a wonderful teacher. She was such a sweetheart. And I learned more from her in the 2 years she was there than I learned the whole school. Yeah.
Now, is she the one that left in the middle of the year?
No,
Oh, that's a different one.
no, yeah. And she, all the teachers that lived away boarded at Simpson's. And she lived in Guildhall. And she'd come over and stay the week, and she had a big, I understand she had a big family. And her husband, that's the way I understood it, was he got burned, really badly burned, so he couldn't work. So she had to support the family. I never have, I always wanted to go see her, but I never did. Of course, she's long gone now, but when I see Sullivan, I wonder if it's any relation. But and the schoolhouse, of course, been made into a house now.
Well, Vivian, we thank you so much for sharing your story with us. We're going to just put this on pause, which means that the interview doesn't have to be over. And if you think of something that you want to say, we'll just put it back on record.
Okay.
So, thank you very much.